Swinburne University of Technology.
When my wife and I got into philanthropy about 6 years ago, we knew nothing about it. And when we decided to focus on education, particularly of underprivileged kids, we knew even less about that space. I'm really chuffed that our journey in this space has been described to you as a good news story, and it certainly is for us. We're on an amazing and thrilling ride at the new school at Doveton, and I hope you're going to find something useful and interesting in the thoughts and the story that I share with you today. Can everyone at the back hear? Sorry, I got a bit of a cold and I speak quietly. Thank you. So I've been asked to tell you something about my background and then about how I got into this space and some of the things that we've learned. I'm 67. I'll go through the personal background first. I'm 67. I was born in Poland in 1946, which becomes significant later on. My dad was a refugee. He got to Australia via a refugee camp in Paris and pulled my mum out of Poland. Mum wasn't a refugee. Dad was Jewish. Mum was Christian. So I got to Australia when I was 5. We were very, very poor. I remember, and I've told this story a number of times, that in the morning Mum used to get an apple and she'd divide it into quarters and we'd each get a quarter, and that was our fruit allocation for the day. But we were happy, and it was we were in Elwood, which is a great area for migrants and refugees, and I attended Elwood Primary School, then directly across the road Elwood State School, and then as we moved from Elwood State School, as we were moving up in Elwood State School, they started building Elwood High School on the side of an old tip. And so I was the second year going through Elwood High School. So when Elwood High School had 4th form, I was 3rd form, and so on. We were poor. We couldn't get into, wasn't going to go to university. I couldn't have got there unless I got a scholarship. By some total fluke, I got a scholarship. The fluke was that my parents, coming from Europe, had made sure that I was educated in music, so I was tortured with playing 2 hours of violin a day for forever. And if you don't know what that means, that's 40 minutes in the morning, 40 minutes after school, and 40 minutes after dinner. That's a lot for a kid. So I made sure that my son, who's in the room with me today, he didn't have to learn the violin, and we didn't do that to him. But then it was my music mark in my matriculation. I got a ridiculously high music mark, and that took what was otherwise fairly average marks up into a good enough mark to get me into Melbourne University, get me a scholarship and get me into law. The ridiculous irony of that was that I'd already applied for a music position in an orchestra in America, and I'd been accepted. So if my music mark had been lower, I'd be a musician, but because it was higher, I'm a lawyer. I graduated, became a partner in a law firm in the sticks in beautiful downtown Reservoir, and then we moved into funds management. We were putting people together in investments. We were eventually taken over by another company, and I was retired. And what I learned, what I got out of that, is that Australia is a magnificent country. It's a brilliant country. No one stops you succeeding. There is no impediment. If you want to work hard, if you want to have a real go, you can. And what I learned was that education's the key to the door. That's a potted version, really quick background. In the funds management business that we had, what we used to do is we used to buy shopping centres and offer bits of them to people as an investment. One of the shopping centres, and this is how I got into philanthropy, one of the shopping centres we had was on the main highway out of Geelong in a place called Newcombe. Right next door to this Newcombe shopping centre was a school. And we wanted to upgrade the shopping centre, so we needed access to car parking. And so I went round to the headmaster of the school and asked if we could park cars in the schoolyard on the weekend. And God bless him, he said, well, what would you do for me? So you know you got a deal coming. It was lovely. And I said, well, what can I do for you? And he told me something that really shook me. He said that we have 40 to 60 kids going from grade 6 to 7 every year, and another 40 to 60 kids going from grade 9 to 10, or 10 to 11 every year, who need the switch in uniforms. They go from long pants to short pants to long pants, and there's some other educational needs that they have, which would cost between 100 and 150, and these 40 to 60 kids, because they don't have $100, $150, can spend the entire year being humiliated, being rubbished by their mates. So I said, okay, what would you like? And he said, well, could you provide scholarships for these kids? If you do that, we'll provide you car parking. So we did that. So my business, which was then called MCS Property, we agreed to do that. And then we kept doing that. We thought that was just something that was a nice thing to do. I'll tell you a story about him. He rang me up one day and he says, listen, can I come down? I wanted to have a talk to you. This land that I've got for the school right next to yours has to be worth a fortune as a shopping centre land. I said, it is. And he said, well, come for a drive with me. He took me down the road, turned left at the first intersection, drove out about a mile to the foot of the Yuyangs. I think it's the Yuyangs. Yeah, something like that. and he's got acres and acres of land there, and he said we could buy that for next to nothing. And I've worked out, says he, I've worked out that if what this land is worth for you as a shopping centre, you could build us a school, and we could get a brand new school there. And we did the numbers, and we could, and we would have made a profit. He would have had a magnificent school. We said, oh, we'll do better than that. We'll give you computers in every classroom, and we would still have made a profit. So that went to the education department, and of course got absolutely killed stone dead. But that guy was good. We got taken over, and the company that took us over didn't think that that was their responsibility, that they shouldn't necessarily continue that work with the kids at Newcombe. I thought that was fair enough, but we'd got really sold on the story, so my wife and I decided we would take that on. A little while later, we decided we wanted to do something bigger in philanthropy, and we set aside a fair sum of money and set up a foundation to help in the education of underprivileged kids. That was the goal. And what we really wanted to do was help where kids who had come from migrant or refugee backgrounds, and as well as that, were being held back by other things, particularly by being in a very poor area. And so what we did, we started going around to schools saying, look, we've got this foundation, can we help? And we would visit dozens of schools and never hear from them. We had an instance where we went to see a school, and the headmaster said, oh, I'm glad, that was fortuitous that you came in. That they had a South American family with 3 kids aged 5, 7 and 8. There'd been a fire on the weekend. Parents in the home had been destroyed. Parents died. These kids are left completely in Australia. No relatives, nothing at all. And a Greek family across the road, who had 5 or 6 of their own, agreed to take these kids in, and would we help? We said, yeah, sure, we'd love to help. So we provided for these kids for clothing and books, and then we said, can we help the Greek family? No response. So we wrote and said, can we help the Greek family? No response. At the end of the year, we said, look, these kids have got an ongoing need. We want to be there for these kids in an ongoing way. No response. Never heard from the school ever again. And we were spending so much time visiting and going around trying to sell the idea that we want to help, and no one would take it up. So I thought we had to do something in a better way. I'd heard about the Andre Agassi school. Andre had set up a school in the poorest part of America, in Las Vegas, in the in one of the black areas where the people work in the casinos, the cleaners, and that, they're getting the $6 an hour, desperately poor area. And his idea was that he would set up this school, put in a huge amount of money, raise money from everyone every year, and try to give these kids the best education that he could possibly give. So I got excited by that, saw the school, spoke to the people there, came back wanting to do something about it. Talked to my wife, and we said, we can't be doing what we've been doing, we just want to do it in a different way. Okay, now put yourself in my position. I don't know anything about philanthropy, and I don't know anything about education. What do you do? Talk to my wife, what do we do? She said, bless her, I remember once, about a year or two ago, I was flying back from overseas in an aeroplane, and I was sitting next to this lady, and she said she used to have something to do with the education department. I think I've still got a card. That was it. So where is she? I think she's still in Abu Dhabi or Dubai or somewhere. So Pam found the card. I rang this lady and said, look, you don't know me from a bar of soap, but we want to do something in this space, and where do we start? Really, no idea at all where to start. And this lady said, well, I know this guy called Bruce Kylo, who used to be in the education department. I think he's about retiring. Why don't you give him a ring? So I did. Bruce, it turns out, had been the principal of a Koori school that the government had set up, especially for Kooris at Northland, to give them sort of an arts access to university. Bruce was wonderful. And he said, look, that's a good idea. We might be able to do something about it. Can I get a mate of mine in? And I said, sure. So he got Jeff Emmett in, Jeff, who used to be with the Teachers Union. And together we sat down and talked about what we wanted to do, what we might do. And the Agassiz School cost $90 million, so that was a little bit beyond what we were going to do. And we kicked it around, and they said, look, hold on, why don't we just go and see the Premier? So they apparently spoke to someone who arranged that I would see the Premier to talk about an idea of, basically the idea that we came up with is that we wanted to attach ourselves to a school. I didn't want to be running around the state begging people to take money. I wanted to be able to basically attach to a school, use the business skills that I had to try to make a difference in one place. So they made an appointment for me to see John Brumby. The appointment he made for the 26th of December, so we're coming up to an anniversary. 26th of December is famous, of course, because it's Boxing Day. This Boxing Day was famous because the Rudd government had only just been elected. And so on the morning of the 26th, I get a call from Brumby's secretary saying, look, the Prime Minister's asked him to go to the Boxing Day test, so he's going to have to cancel your meeting. Yeah, of course. But he'd still like to, he's going to come back from the Boxing Day test and wants to see it at 4 o'clock. So I rock up at 4 o'clock. Brumby comes in, Premier Brumby comes in, shakes hands. G'day, Julius, nice to see you. I'm sorry we're late. I just want to show you something on a PowerPoint presentation. And he pitches my idea back to me on PowerPoint, but twisting it, trying to suggest that we do it in a slightly different way. And that was good, because we actually didn't have an idea of exactly what way we were going to do it. And he pitches effectively the idea that we would do, pick an area, and that the government, if we were going to do that, the government might get in behind it. He was very impressive. As he was winding up, I said, yeah, look, I'm interested. I'd like to think about your idea. But I'm interested, and I've got to be frank, I don't know what's happening here. From my knowledge of governments do nothing and pretend to do probably even less. And what's happening here? And he said, you were born in 1946. You're the first of the baby boomers. If we spent every dollar that the state had on education, we wouldn't be spending enough. If we can get you interested in this, then we might be able to get other people interested in it, and it's got to be a good thing. I said, okay, fantastic. Look, yeah, I'm interested. He said, well, if you're interested, I'll get the Minister for Education. Hold on a minute. He goes in another room, comes back and says, she'll see you tomorrow, 27th of December. Who's ever heard of government working that way? I hadn't. I hadn't. Now, it wasn't all good. I mean, well, it really wasn't all good. At various times, it would end up back with department people, and it would end up in dark holes, and it doesn't come out. And you go into meetings with a whole bunch of people, and like you see in business, in some areas of business, the frightening areas of business, the banks and other people, and the big corporates, once you get into big groups, there's probably no one in the entire room that actually wants anything to happen, and they don't care about anything happening. All they're concerned about is if it doesn't go ahead, if it goes ahead and I've ticked off on it what's going to happen to me if it fails, and if it doesn't go ahead and I was pushing it, what's going to happen to me. So it's all about me and my job and nothing about the project. And in the education department, it kept getting stuck in places, but I'd just make a call to Bruce or Jeff, and they would talk to someone in the Premier's office and it would get unstuck. So within weeks, we've said we want to do this, but we want to go into an area which is massively underprivileged. We want to go into an area where there's a lot of migrants, there's a lot of refugees, and the government said, well, okay, here's a bunch of areas, and then they got 2 ministerial cars with all the people in the education department that just drove us around to these areas. One of them was Doveton. I loved it. Incredibly poor. But I couldn't believe that we were driving past those, those chainmail fences, the fences made of wire that it's all linked in. In several places where you saw those fences had been sort of torn apart, the people in them had stuck them together with string or wire. There was no graffiti. It's desperately poor. But these are people, I felt that really wanted to get somewhere, and of course they are. What do migrants and refugees want more than anything else? They want to improve their lot. They're aspirational. And so I said, look, okay, I'll have a look at these. And I drove around Frankston and Broady, and I came into Doveton. I left the car and I just walked for a couple of days around the streets, and really just thought, these are. They're polite, they're good people. I'd never seen people give way to me at intersections the way they gave way there. I don't know what that meant, but I thought that was impressive. So then we did a deal with the government, and the government nailed me into something I didn't want to be nailed, and I nailed back. The government wanted me to put some money into the building. I didn't want to put money into the building. I wanted it to be used to, provide annually to provide a better school. And the government, the deal I did, the government nailed me to put 1.8 million into the building, but the deal I got for that is that the government promised to build a 20% better school. They'd build it where we chose together, and I wanted it to be on the top of the hill in Doveton. And I want, something that looks like another poor school in a poor area where you're going to give the poor people something that's not good. So they had to build a 20% better school. And that still wasn't enough, and what I got them to agree to is that because the 1.8 million was supposed to be delivering annual income, which would then be there for the school for the next 10 years, I got the government to agree to put in an extra 240,000 a year, every year, to the school above whatever other budget it would have got, and they've got to pay that regardless of whether the school moves up the social structure. So it was a really good deal. And then the government said, okay, well, look, if we're going to do Doveton, what we will do it. We'll put the Doveton plan that we have, which was to close a number of schools, we'll put it to the top of the agenda, we'll start building straight away. And that's what happened. That's what happened then. Where the architects are in, everything's going full bore, and someone suggested to me I should have a look at the NAPLAN results for the area. So I did. I asked for them, and I asked for them in an unusual way, and I was able to get every child in the Doveton Triangle. There were 67 kids in the Doveton Triangle. I was able to get their NAPLAN result from grade 3, regardless of where they'd been at school. So it was just limited to Doveton. Of the 67 children in Doveton, not one had numeracy at the grade 3, not one had numeracy at the appropriate level, and only I think 3 had literacy at the appropriate level. Okay, so I'm pretty horrified about that. Now, have no idea what to do. And I'm kicking it around and talking to people, and someone said, have you looked in the back of the book? I said, what do you mean? He said, have you looked at the definitions in the back of the book of what is an appropriate level for grade 3 NAPLAN? I said, no. So I did. And the appropriate level for grade 3 NAPLAN is grade 1. So we've got 67 children from the Doveton Triangle who are in grade 3, who are sitting grade 3 numeracy tests, not one of whom is at grade 1 numeracy. They've been at school for 2.5 years, they're 2.5 years behind. Okay, so that threw a real spanner in the works. Now I don't know what to do. So I talked to Bruce and Jeff and talked to other people, and then people start saying, I mean, look, you really know what it's all about these days, don't you? It's early childhood. And I said, well, early childhood what? Well, you mean, you know, start them at age 4? And they said, no, start them at age 2 or 1. Give them an early childhood education so that by the time they get to the first year at school, they're not 2 and 3 years behind. Okay, back to the government. And again, they were wonderful. The architect was in the middle of finalising the plans, and we had a vision. The Andre Agassi, which was incorporated into the plans for this grade 1 to grade 12 school, and the vision was the Agassi vision. Agassi has a bridge between 2 buildings in the Agassi College in Las Vegas, and there's an agora underneath, which is where all the kids always meet and eat and everything else like that. And no one has been allowed on the bridge. You're not allowed on the bridge. Not even Andre Agassi has been able to step foot on the bridge. The bridge is reserved for those people who graduate year 12. Because nobody does that in Las Vegas, and nobody does it in a black area. So that was reserved for them. So that was the vision. We're going to do that. Now what are we going to do? There's no more land. We can't get land. We can't start early childhood. We've got to do something about it. So what we decide is that we're going to blow away year 12, 11 and 10 at the school and start early. I mean, really early. We want to start 6 months before birth. We haven't yet done that. Agassi does. What they do is they trawl around the local area. If they find a pregnant woman, they say, do you want to go to baby college? 9 weeks, Saturday mornings. You come at 8 o'clock, we feed you and all your kids. We'll feed them, we'll look after them. You leave at about 12 o'clock and we'll feed you lunch. And at the end of 9 weeks, we hope you can graduate from baby college. And what we're going to teach you is read to your kids. If you're having problems with your husband, this is where to go. By the way, read to your kids. If you're having problems with Social Security, this is where you go. By the way, read to your kids. And you know, all of that sort of stuff. At the end of 9 weeks, these people graduate. They get a piece of paper. They've never had a piece of paper. And what you're doing is not just giving them the piece of paper. You're not just hooking them into the system. You're starting to teach them that education's the key to the door. So we haven't started baby college yet, but we have 130 odd kids in early childhood education. We've just had our first review. The review is outstanding. There are only 4 centres of excellence in childhood education, and we're just behind that in our first year of operation. So incredibly proud. We have 30 kids. We've got a Master of Education in every class. If you want to see something completely beautiful, and Carl's coming over there tomorrow, we'll in the early education classes, these kids put themselves to bed whenever they want. We're 30 to 40% Muslim, we're 30 to 40% black, and you see these little, tiny little beds and these kids putting themselves to sleep. It's gorgeous beyond belief. So the school's about to be up and running. We've changed the whole design in midstream. We're blown away. Yes, 12, 11 and 10, and we're doing early childhood. We're going to get these kids educated before so that they're not as far behind. And we learn new things. Someone introduces me to a study. Professor Phil Rickards from Melbourne University is here. Thanks, Phil, for coming. Professor Rickards works with John Hattie. John Hattie is this philosophical education type, thinking type person out of New Zealand who did a research paper which is the most mind-numbingly difficult title that you've ever seen. I don't think any word in the title is less than about 16 letters. But what it does, it's a study of every study ever done on children. So he didn't do a study, he did a study of every study. So his study is the study of the outcomes of 300 million children. and he produces some astonishing conclusions, which are just like they're written down. I mean, this is what it's all about. And the conclusions are that a fraction less than 50% of the educational outcomes of children comes not from the school. 30% comes from teachers, another 18–19% from things related to the school, the buildings, the uniform, other things that go on in the school, and a little over 50% comes from the child himself, the family and the community. So when governments spend billions of dollars on education, the reality is they're hitting at 49%. And so, okay, so what are we going to do about that? So what we're going to do about that is we're going to hook the school into the community. Absolutely fundamental. Every single social service, everything, anything that happens in the community, we're going to try to have operating out of the school. We're going to have children's health, breastfeeding, everything else like that. Well, you come along there on a wet day in winter, and you'll find 60 prams out there. We've got a mother's group just meeting with their kids, and they're just meeting. On another day, we had a woman turn up, and she asked if she, an Afghanistan woman, if she wanted to use a sewing machine. Could we provide one? So we did. A few days later, there were a few more. A month or two later, there were 50. And then they said, and we're more than one sewing machine, of course, we had to beg and borrow them. And then they said, well, they're coming to here, they're spending a few hours. Could we arrange for a volunteer to come and speak English to them, and they'll make the rule that they won't speak anything other than English in the class. That's the people of Doveton. That's the aspirational level. Not everything went well. We haven't even got this up, and The Age writes a very flattering article about what my wife and I are doing, and put it on page 3 on Saturday, the prime page. We're really chuffed. A number of our friends ring and say, isn't that really terrific? And the next day the Australian Tax Office rings and says, what the hell are you doing? Seriously, you can't do that. What do you mean I can't do that? You cannot do that. You cannot help in education. I don't know, I'm not going to tell you too much about that, but we fixed it, we overcame it, but not without a massive fight. What the tax office did is just untrue. They give you a statement of what the law is, which is false. They say that the law, under the law, let me tell you what the logic is. Their line of thinking is, you're a benevolent, public benevolent, that's what we were, the Colman Foundation, public benevolent institution. We agree that the word benevolent isn't clear, but we believe that if governments do it, it's government work, and if governments do it, it can't be benevolent. Now, the logic of that is insane. I mean, it really doesn't stand any scrutiny at all. And they go back to a 1920s case, and they say, here's the authority. The authority there was was called the naval ratings case. A bunch of some people wanted to provide accommodation, nice things for naval ratings, who were employed by the government as naval ratings, okay? They wanted to provide something, and the High Court said that that wasn't a charitable or benevolent activity. Okay, that's fair enough. And they're trying to say that then says if governments do it, it can't be benevolent. The problem that they've got with that is that inside that case, the High Court commented with approval on another case where a bunch of unions set up a kindergarten for their workers, a number of kindergartens, and the High Court says that's okay. So I can tell you as a lawyer that it's impossible then to say that the High Court says what the tax office says. So why are they saying it? Well, I don't know. I think that there's a real fear. The tax people were lovely. But they came, they're saying our hands are tied. It seems that someone in Treasury, I'm not going to go into this too much further, it seems that someone in Treasury fears that if you allow people to donate to education, then people are going to sort of fiddle around and not pay the kids' fees but make a donation instead and get around. That's nonsense. You just write a law that says if you do that you go to jail, no one will do it. You know, but whatever. So, Doveton, we opened in February last year. We got hundreds of kids from the schools around that were closed. And now we're 20 months in. The secondary part of the school wasn't finished until April of this year, so we've really only been going for 6 months with the whole school around. It's not an easy area. It's not an easy area. We just took a bunch of, we just opened up grade 9 this year, so we got our first bunch of grade 9s. And we religiously testing for everything. Of the grade 9s that we got this year, 45% are 5 or more years behind. Yeah, well, you hear that, you don't believe it. 45% of our grade 9s are 5 or more years behind. Now you've got to teach them. You got to do what? I've got a teacher in front of 20 kids, and 10 of them are 5 years behind, and a few of them are 4 years behind, a few are 3, and she's going to be teaching grade 9. Grade 9 they are. She's going to be treating grade 9 maths, and what's the curriculum? Algebra. 3x and 2y equals 4 on z, and work it out. These kids can't add. It's a difficult area. We get 100 boat, well, until the recent changes, and I don't know what the numbers are today. Maybe they're the same, maybe they're not. We get 100 boat people a month dropped into the Doveton Triangle. The Agassiz School cannot believe what we're doing. They cannot believe that anyone would try to do something like this. They're doing it in one of the poorest areas of America. So Doveton is the 3rd poorest non-country area in Australia, on their, you know, the sort of surveys that they do. The Agassiz area is very poor, but they're 99% black, and they're 99% Christian, and they all go to the same churches. We are absolutely disparate. We speak 67 languages in the school. I don't know the names of half. I've never heard the names of half the languages, where, as I said, we're 30 or 40% black, we're 30 or 40% Muslim. So it's difficult and it's challenging, but we've got a brilliant headmaster. We've got some incredibly exciting programs. How am I going for time?
Another 5.
Okay, I'm going to skip through just a couple of things. I do want to tell you about some. Ask me about. You got 20-minute question time, isn't it? During the question time, ask me about the amazing programs. Philanthropy in education is not easy. I came across an amazing article in the Wall Street Journal. A guy had interviewed Bill Gates. And I'm just going to give you a really quick potted version of some of the things that Bill Gates says. Lots of philanthropic efforts have tried to impact education. Some have been huge philanthropic efforts. But school systems are run by powerful unions and by top-down government monopoly providers. It isn't a good place to try to make a difference. In the 1970s, the Ford, Carnegie and Rockefeller Foundations instituted a series of lawsuits in America which resulted in enormous increases in state expenditure for low-income students. It didn't move the needle. In 1993, Walter Annenberg gave $500 million to 9 large city school systems. It didn't make a difference. In 2004, Bill Gates said he was going to spend $100 million opening up 20 small high schools, specialized, really giving concentrated education. And what does Bill Gates say about that? It didn't move the needle much. Bill Gates warns against overestimating the potential power of philanthropy. He says it's worth remembering that around 600 billion a year is spent by various government entities on education, and all the philanthropy that's ever been spent in this space isn't going to add up to more than 10 billion. So what he says, it's truly just a rounding error. So what Bill and Melinda Gates did is they then went off and funded a whole bunch of research, spent 350 odd million funding research into what makes a good teacher. The research has come out this year. It's phenomenal. You've got to read it. It's in 4 sections. It's phenomenal research, and there's a at the front there's a 2 or 3 page executive summary in front of each section, and it's terrific. And one of the things we're going to try and introduce that, and one of the key things in how you find teachers is stick them in front of the kids. Ask the kids. But Bill Gates' key conclusion, after looking at how everyone has spent money and how he's spent and not wasted, how he spent money and hasn't moved the needle, he says that his conclusion is that the most effective way that he thinks philanthropy can help in education is to leverage private money into a local area, get good local support and local buy-in. That's the model we lucked into with the help of Premier Brumby and lots of other people. That's the model that we're working at Doveton College. We lucked into that. I'd love to say it was a result of my genius. It wasn't at all, and I got pulled kicking and screaming to some of those conclusions. But what we're doing now, we've got a terrific council, 12 people on the council, 4 parents, 4 government, 4 Colman Foundation reps. In the 18 months we have never ever had to have a vote. Every single decision on the council has been by unanimous vote. So with okay, so key takeaways. What might you take away from my story? If you have a dream, you can make a difference. Don't give up. No's never an answer. It's only feedback. It really is only feedback. It doesn't matter who's telling you, no, you can't be done. All they're saying is that the way you've put it, or the way you've said it, or who you've approached, you've made a mistake there. Don't give up on the idea. A really big takeaway is the model that we've got at Doveton is a really good model. And of course, if you look at that, if what you're trying to do is leverage private money in a local area with the support and the buy-in of the local people, that's bringing you full circle to what Professor John Hattie's research shows. You're impacting the 50% that isn't being provided by government, and 50% of the educational outcomes is where that comes. So how do you do this? How can you help? Easy. If you can do this in a big way, I think you can do it. I think this thing can be replicated. Our total commitment over 10 years is going to wind up about 5 million, or probably a bit more. But we set aside the 5. That was what was in the foundation, and that's going to fund this school for 10 years. That's been critical. It's been critical because no one wants to work with a 1-year plan. No one wants to work with a 2-year plan. They want to know that if you're going to come up with something interesting, you can fund it for a number of years. And so we've committed, what we're doing in our foundation is just making sure that the investments are working well enough, that they produce enough income that we can add to the pile and last out at least 10 years. And then we're trying to raise money outside that, and we've been doing quite well, and I hope we will do better. And I'm not going to leave you without asking for some money, but you don't have to give it to us. We have a whole bunch of these desperately poor kids who can have an early childhood education that is really spectacular. Their parents can't afford the $40 a week that they need, $40 a week that they need. So we look for scholarships. If anyone is interested in providing a $2,000 scholarship, which will give one of these kids, a desperately poor and underprivileged kid, an absolutely brilliant early childhood education, we would gladly take your money, and see me afterwards. I hope you found some of my thoughts useful. Thank you for coming along tonight. I can't believe you'd turn out to hear something like this in the last week before Christmas, so I really appreciate it. And I hope that I've given you some insights that make it worthwhile.
This has been a Swinburne production.